The morning began with a sound that didn't belong. A sharp, frantic scratching against glass, followed by a guttural bark that shattered the quiet comfort of early dawn. Keagan Frostveil shot up from the couch, his heart thudding against his ribs. The room, still draped in that gray-blue light of sunrise, felt colder than it should. Just a few feet away, pressed against the patio door, Rusty Blackfang, their German shepherd, was barking like the house was under siege. His paws slammed the glass with desperation, his eyes locked on something unseen beyond the fence line. Hawthorne Ridgeflint was already halfway across the living room, her hand reaching instinctively for the dog. "Rusty?" she called, voice soft but edged with panic. "What is it, boy?" But Rusty didn't turn toward her. His hackles were raised, his tail stiff like a flag in a storm. He growled now, deep in his throat, but his body was trembling slightly. It wasn't just alarm, it was fear. Keagan joined her at the window, squinting past the glass into the backyard. The morning looked still, unnaturally so. No birdsong, no breeze, no movement. Then they saw it. A figure motionless, standing just beyond the back fence. Neither of them spoke at first. Stood too straight, too still. The shadows clung to it, even as sunlight slowly bled across the grass. "Is that someone?" Hawthorne asked, voice barely audible. Keagan didn't answer. He reached for his phone, hands unsteady, using the zoom to get a closer look. The figure didn't shift. It didn't blink. It was turned toward them, head tilted slightly, as if listening. Rusty stopped barking. He sat down, letting out a low whine, his ears folded back in dread. Keagan slowly lowered the phone, his face ashen. "It's not moving. It hasn't moved at all." His voice sounded far away, the kind of voice someone used when they were trying not to believe what they were seeing. Hawthorne wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how exposed they were behind the glass. The figure still hadn't budged, like a statue waiting for a command. "Maybe it needs help?" she whispered, though every fiber of her being told her otherwise. Then Rusty did something that made the air shift. He stood, turned his head sharply to the right, toward the tree line behind their property, and barked again. Fiercer, angrier. There was something else out there. Keagan Frostveil stood frozen by the glass door, jaw clenched, eyes bouncing between Rusty Blackfang and the unmoving figure beyond the fence. A chill crept through the room, though the heater hummed quietly in the background. Hawthorne Ridgeflint stepped beside him, wrapping her hand around his forearm. "It hasn't moved at all," she whispered. Rusty continued barking now toward the woods. Whatever had caught his attention wasn't alone. The figure, silent and still, was just part of something larger, something hidden. Keagan turned to Rusty, knelt beside him, and gently grabbed his collar. The dog's body trembled beneath his hand. This wasn't just alertness. It was something primal, a deep, instinctive fear. "You've never acted like this before," Keagan murmured. Hawthorne grabbed a pair of binoculars from the hallway drawer and returned, raising them slowly. She aimed toward the fence. "Keagan," she breathed, her hand shaking slightly. "It's not just standing there. It's wearing something, old clothes, like from another time." That's when the figure moved. It was subtle, a shift in the shoulder, a slight tilt of the head, enough to confirm what they feared. This wasn't a mannequin or a statue. It was alive. But the way it moved, so slow, so deliberate, sent a bolt of unease through Keagan's chest. "I'm calling the police," he said, but even as he grabbed his phone, part of him hesitated. What exactly would he say? "There's a man standing still at our fence wearing 1940s farm clothes and terrifying our dog?" Rusty let out a guttural growl and suddenly stepped backward, nudging Keagan's knee. He looked down at the dog, surprised by the retreat. Then Rusty did something unexpected. He turned and ran. Not toward the door. Toward the hallway. Away from the backyard. It was as if something beyond the glass had crossed an invisible line. Hawthorne turned from the binoculars. Her face had gone pale. "Keagan, I think he looked right at me." She wasn't blinking. "He knows we're watching." A low knock echoed from the back door. Not a bang. Not a rattle. A knock. 3 slow taps on the glass. Keagan dropped the phone. The sound of the knock echoed like thunder inside the silence that followed. Keagan Frostveil stood motionless, heart pounding so violently it felt like it might tear through his chest. The phone lay on the floor near his feet, forgotten. Across from him, Hawthorne Ridgeflint's face had drained of all color, her hand pressed to her mouth as if holding back a scream. The knock hadn't come from the front door. It was at the glass, right where the figure had been. But when Keagan dared to look, the figure was gone. The backyard stretched out beneath the morning light, still eerily silent. There was no sign of the man in the old clothes, just empty grass, trees, and a creeping sense that something unseen still lingered nearby. Rusty Blackfang hadn't returned. They could hear him pacing in the hallway, whining low, paws clicking anxiously on the hardwood floor. "This isn't normal," Hawthorne said finally, her voice brittle. "That knock, it wasn't a threat. It felt like a message." Keagan nodded slowly, eyes still scanning every shadow, every edge of the yard. "Or a warning," he muttered. He unlocked the back door, just enough to open it a crack. A gust of cold air rushed in, sharp and unnatural, and with it, a smell. Not the earthy scent of grass or rain. This was metallic, stale, like rust and old wood. He shut the door again immediately, locking it twice. "I'm calling Jared Ashthorne," he said. "If anyone knows what's going on in this area, it's him." Jared was the town's unofficial historian, and a bit of a recluse. But he'd lived in Hawthorne's family property for decades before the Frostveils bought it. If there were secrets in this land, Jared would know. Keagan dialed, hands shaking slightly. Jared answered after the third ring, his voice gravelly and slow. "Frostveil?" he asked. "You see him too?" The words made Keagan go cold. "You what?" Keagan replied. "You've seen him?" Jared was quiet for a moment. Then, "Don't open the door. Not today." Keagan didn't need more than that. He ended the call and turned to Hawthorne, who was now kneeling beside Rusty, trying to comfort him. The dog flinched at every sound, eyes fixed on the hallway's end. Hawthorne looked up. "He's still out there, isn't he?" Keagan didn't respond. Instead, he walked to the bookshelf, pulled down the old deed to the house, and flipped to the back page. Scribbled in fading ink was a name neither of them remembered seeing before. Silas Breakwater. And next to it, in smaller writing, "Do not disturb him after the knock." Keagan Frostveil stared at the name written in faded ink. Silas Breakwater. It looked almost burned into the page, though there were no signs of fire, just time and something heavier. "You ever see this name before?" he asked. Hawthorne Ridgeflint shook her head slowly, eyes locked on the handwritten note beneath it. "Do not disturb him after the knock." A chill climbed her spine. Silas Breakwater. "That sounds like someone out of an obituary," she muttered. Keagan sat back, mind racing. The name wasn't on any of the official documents from the sale. It was almost like someone had scribbled it there intentionally, to be found only when it mattered. "Do you think it's him?" Hawthorne asked, her voice tightening. "The man outside?" Keagan didn't answer immediately. Rusty Blackfang had returned to the living room but refused to go near the back door. He paced in slow circles, ears twitching at every creak of the house. "I need to go see Jared Ashthorne," Keagan said suddenly. Hawthorne's eyes widened. "Now? After what just happened?" But Keagan was already grabbing his coat. "He knows something. He saw him too. And he knew the name. I'm not waiting for nightfall with that thing out there." Hawthorne hesitated, then nodded. "I'll stay here with Rusty. I'll lock everything. Just..." She paused, then added, "Don't talk to anyone else. If Jared really knows what this is, you need to hear it from him first." The drive to Jared's cabin felt longer than usual. The winding road through the woods felt more closed in, the trees looming overhead like silent watchers. Keagan's knuckles tightened on the steering wheel as he replayed the knock in his mind. Not violent, not rushed, but deliberate 3 slow taps. Almost human, almost. When he reached the old property, Jared was already standing on the porch, as if he'd been expecting him. "You shouldn't have waited," Jared muttered. "They come back stronger if you ignore the first visit." Keagan stepped out of the car, eyes narrowing. "They? You mean there's more than one?" Jared nodded grimly. "Silas Breakwater wasn't just a man. He was the first caretaker of the land you're living on. Died in 1892 under strange circumstances. Folks say he never left. And ever since, people who live there get a visit. Sometimes a warning. Sometimes a choice." Keagan's pulse quickened. "A choice for what?" Jared looked him in the eye. "To open the door or not." Behind him, something rustled in the trees. Keagan Frostveil didn't respond right away. He stood at the bottom of Jared Ashthorne's porch steps, eyes searching the dense tree-line behind the cabin. Whatever had made that sound wasn't an animal. Not tonight. Jared's warning replayed in his mind. To open the door or not. That wasn't a metaphor. It was a decision, a dangerous one. Jared lit a cigarette with shaking hands and sat slowly on an old wooden chair. "You still think this is something you can explain?" he asked quietly. Keagan stepped closer. "You said Silas Breakwater was the first caretaker. What does that mean?" Jared exhaled smoke through his nose. "It means he made a pact with whatever was in those woods long before your house was ever built. He was supposed to protect the land, honor certain rules. But he didn't, and when he died, something stayed behind, bound to that property. Waiting." Keagan's stomach twisted. "Waiting for what?" Jared crushed the cigarette out with a shaking thumb. "For a moment of weakness." Meanwhile, back at the house, Hawthorne Ridgeflint sat on the living room floor with Rusty Blackfang's head in her lap. The dog still refused to face the window. She tried the TV, music, even opened the Bible her grandmother had left her. Nothing made the atmosphere feel less thick. The air had weight now, as if the walls themselves were pressing in. Then, faint, came a sound from the hallway. Not the door this time. The wall. The tapping. 3 times. Hawthorne froze. Her heart pounded. She looked down the hall but saw no one. The shadows felt longer than they should be. Rusty growled, deep and uncertain. Slowly, Hawthorne stood, walking toward the noise. Every step felt heavier than the last. As she neared the end of the hallway, something shifted. A coldness swept through her, not like air conditioning, but like stepping through fog. And there, etched into the drywall with something dark and jagged, was a single word. "Open." Back at Jared's, Keagan gripped the porch railing. "Why now? Why me?" Jared didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled out an old photograph, yellowed and torn. He handed it to Keagan. The image showed a group of 6 men standing outside what looked like the very same property Keagan now owned. Jared pointed to one figure, a tall man with hollow eyes. "That's Silas Breakwater. And that," he paused, tapping another man standing beside him, "is Tyrone Marrowbridge, my grandfather." Keagan's breath caught in his throat. They were standing in front of his house. But it wasn't built yet. Keagan Frostveil stared at the photo in disbelief. His breath felt trapped in his chest. The empty plot behind the men was unmistakable. It was his backyard. But the strangest part wasn't the absence of the house. It was the object between Silas Breakwater and Tyrone Marrowbridge. A wooden door frame standing alone in the grass, as if built for something to pass through or be held back. "What is that?" Keagan asked, voice low. Jared Ashthorne's eyes didn't leave the picture. "That door? It was buried. Right under where your home stands now." Keagan stepped back instinctively, as if he could already feel the cursed structure beneath his feet, even from miles away. "Why bury a door?" Jared's reply was almost a whisper. "Because they thought it would stop him from coming back. But the knock always returns. Sometimes it takes decades. Sometimes just years. It's not just Silas anymore. Something else crossed with him." Keagan's mind reeled, thinking about the figure by the fence. The knock. The smell. The word on the wall. "Open." Back at the house, Hawthorne Ridgeflint stood frozen in the hallway. The word scrawled into the plaster seemed to bleed in the dim light. Rusty Blackfang whimpered behind her, pawing nervously at the floor. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the wall, as if touching it would somehow confirm it was real. The moment her skin met the surface, a vibration rippled through her body. Not physical, but something deeper. An ancient dread. Presence. She yanked her hand back. "You're not welcome here," she whispered into the silence. Then the lights flickered. Every bulb in the house dimmed for a second, then flared. Rusty barked furiously and bolted toward the living room window, growling at something outside. Hawthorne followed him, heart pounding. As she approached the window, she caught a glimpse of the yard. And there, where the figure had stood earlier, was now a hole. Perfectly dug, rectangular pit. Deep, fresh, and at its center, something wooden protruded from the soil. A door frame, not built upright like in the photo, but now laid flat in the earth like a grave marker. Keagan's phone buzzed violently as he drove home. A message from Hawthorne lit the screen. A photo. The image showed Rusty snarling at the window, and behind him, in the reflection, was the unmistakable silhouette of a man standing inside the hallway. Not outside. Inside. Keagan Frostveil's hands gripped the steering wheel as if it were the only thing keeping him grounded. The photo Hawthorne Ridgeflint had just sent sat heavy in his mind. The man in the hallway wasn't blurry or faint. He was clear, solid, standing just behind Rusty, staring straight into the reflection of the glass. It wasn't just someone watching them now. He was inside. Keagan pressed harder on the gas, tires kicking up leaves and gravel. Whatever this was, it had crossed a boundary. Back at the house, Hawthorne stood frozen in the living room, one hand covering her mouth, the other clenched tightly around her phone. She hadn't heard a door open, hadn't heard a window break, but she felt it, that gut-deep, unnatural awareness that they were no longer alone. Rusty Blackfang stood between her and the hallway now, his stance rigid, head low, growling like he'd just come face to face with something older than memory. She backed up slowly, whispering his name. "Rusty, come here, please." But Rusty didn't move. Instead, he barked once, sharp and commanding, and charged down the hallway. Hawthorne panicked. "No, wait!" she screamed, running after him. As she turned the corner, the hallway stretched unnaturally long, like the house was warping, expanding, swallowing itself from the inside. The air was thick, humming, almost vibrating. She followed Rusty's barks into the guest bedroom and found it ice cold. The window was shut, but the closet door stood wide open. Inside, nothing but darkness. No coats, no shelves, just black. Rusty paced in front of it, barking wildly now, refusing to cross the threshold. Hawthorne reached for the closet door to slam it shut, but the moment her fingers touched the wood, a voice whispered from inside, breathless, guttural, and wrong. "You saw it. Now you carry it." She yanked her hand back with a cry and stumbled into the hallway wall, heart thundering. Rusty pressed himself against her legs protectively, still barking furiously. Then something moved inside the closet, not out but deeper in. Keagan burst through the front door seconds later, calling Hawthorne's name, his voice shaking. She answered from the hall, and he ran to her, nearly colliding with Rusty in the narrow space. She pointed wordlessly at the closet. Keagan stepped closer, peering inside. No shelves, no floor, just void. And at the far edge of that darkness, two pale eyes blinked once, then vanished. He slammed the door shut. Hawthorne collapsed to the floor, shaking. "It's not just haunting us," she said, breathless. "It's pulling us in." Keagan Frostveil sat on the edge of the bed with his head in his hands, breathing hard. The closet door was now nailed shut. Not locked, not barricaded, nailed. For heavy nails, driven into the frame like it was never meant to be opened again. Rusty Blackfang lay at his feet, still alert, eyes trained on the hallway. Hawthorne Ridgeflint, wrapped in a thick blanket, sat across from him in the armchair. She hadn't spoken in nearly 10 minutes. The silence between them was loud, and heavy with one truth neither wanted to admit. Whatever this was, it wasn't finished. I think it wants to be remembered, she said finally, voice raw. Like something erased, clawing its way back. Keagan looked up at her. Or replaced. Like, it's trying to become something again. His mind replayed Jared Ashtorn's words. A choice. Was that what the knock was? A test? And what happened if someone did open the door? The idea churned in his stomach. He pulled out the old photo Jared had given him again and stared at Silas Breakwater's lifeless expression. His eyes seemed to follow you even in black and white. I need to go back to Jared, Keagan said, standing. Hawthorne didn't argue this time. She just nodded. Bring the photo, and ask him what it means. You carry it now. Rusty rose to his feet as Keagan grabbed his coat. Before he could open the front door, there was a sudden loud knock, but not on the door. From the back of the house. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. On the wall. Rusty froze, then let out a low, miserable whine. Keagan's breath caught in his throat. The knocking wasn't coming from outside. It was inside the house. He turned back to Hawthorne, who was already standing, wide-eyed. It's following us through the walls now, she said. It's getting closer. The knock came again, this time louder and closer. Something was shifting. The entity was no longer bound to doorways. Whatever had been waiting was now moving freely. Back at Jared's cabin, an old book lay open on the table. Faded pages detailed sketches of doorframes, rituals, and names long erased from local history. One sketch in particular showed a figure split in two, one half human, the other shadow, bound together by a rope made of bone. Jared traced his finger across the page. Silas, what did you let through? He whispered to himself. The candles on his table flickered violently. His breath caught. He wasn't alone in the cabin anymore. Back at the Frostveil home, Hawthorne whispered as the knocks drew closer down the hallway. It's not trying to get in. It's trying to bring something out. Keagan Frostveil returned to Jared Ashtorn's cabin just before nightfall, headlights cutting through the thickening fog that now seemed to settle over the woods like a warning. The trees stood still, too still, as if even the wind had chosen to stay away. When he knocked, Jared didn't answer. The door creaked open by itself. Inside, the cabin smelled of burnt wax and old paper. On the table, the book was still open, but Jared was nowhere in sight. Jared, Keagan called out. No reply, just the crackling of an unseen candle. He stepped deeper inside, passing the worn-out photo still lying beside the pages. Something about the air felt wrong, charged, like the moment before a thunderstorm. And then he saw it, scratched into the floorboards, leading to the cellar door, breakwater line. The same phrase repeated in a spiral, growing tighter, more aggressive until it reached the trapdoor. Keagan hesitated, then pulled it open. Cold air rushed up from the dark, along with something else, the faint sound of breathing. Back at the house, Hawthorne Ridgeflint had gathered every mirror, photograph, and reflective surface and covered them with sheets or blankets. Rusty Blackfang followed her every move, tail low, ears twitching. The knocks had stopped an hour ago, but the silence that followed was far worse. She felt like she was being watched through the walls. Inside the guest bedroom, the closet door, nailed shut, had begun to buckle. Not from pressure, but from something pressing to come out. In Jared's cellar, Keagan found a small lantern and descended the steps slowly. The walls were lined with old mining tools, stacked crates, and bundles of dried herbs. Then he saw Jared, slumped against the far wall, still breathing, but dazed. His hand clutched something tightly. As Keagan reached him, Jared's eyes opened slowly. It's beneath your house, he rasped. Not the spirit, the anchor. What's keeping it here? He coughed. You have to dig. Right where the doorframe was buried. You break that anchor, you break its hold. Back home, Hawthorne's phone buzzed. A message from Keagan. Dig. Backyard. Doorframe. She didn't hesitate. With Rusty beside her, she rushed into the backyard. Flashlight in one hand, shovel in the other. The sky was pitch black now, but something in the earth pulled at her. A hollow hum beneath her feet. She dug faster, dirt flying in all directions, Rusty barking louder with each shovelful. And then clank. Her shovel hit something hard. Wooden. She dropped to her knees, brushing away soil. A large plank, buried deep, bound with wire and bone. From behind her, the wind howled suddenly, but the trees didn't move. Hawthorne Ridgeflint stared at the unearthed wood in the soil, a fragment of the ancient doorframe, still wrapped in wire and bone, weathered by time but pulsing with something unnatural. Rusty Blackfang stood beside her, ears back, tail stiff, growling low. The hum under her feet grew louder, not like sound, but like pressure inside her bones. The ground beneath the plank seemed to breathe, inhale and exhale, as if waiting. She didn't wait for Keagan's return. She reached for the shovel. Back in the cellar, Keagan Frostveil helped Jared Ashthorne up the stairs, the old man limping heavily. "If you break the anchor," Jared whispered, "do it all the way. The bones bind it. The frame holds it. If one piece stays behind, so will he." Keagan nodded. He dialed Hawthorne, but the call dropped before it rang once. The signal was gone. Outside, a dense wall of fog rolled through the trees like a living thing, blanketing the path between him and home. Hawthorne struck the plank again, splintering the wood. Beneath it, fragments of skull and teeth peeked out, human remains woven into the door's foundation. The door wasn't just symbolic. It was built on someone, sacrificed, maybe even willingly, to keep Silas Breakwater tethered to the land. Rusty began barking wildly, spinning in circles, snapping at the air. The wind howled louder. Lights in the house behind her began to flicker violently. The closet door upstairs buckled and cracked, then burst open. From the house, a figure stepped onto the porch. Not walking, gliding. His form was humanoid but wrong, stretched, drenched in shadow with hollow sockets where eyes should be. It moved toward her slowly, as if drawn by the light of the exposed bones. Hawthorne drove the shovel one final time into the wood, splintering it into pieces. As the last plank snapped, a scream, high-pitched and not human, tore through the air, shaking the ground beneath her knees. Keagan emerged from the fog just in time to see the figure stagger, limbs seizing, then crumble into a swirl of smoke and ash. The trees moaned, the wind vanished, and silence dropped like a curtain over the yard. Hawthorne fell backward into the dirt, breathing hard, tears streaming down her face. Rusty lay beside her, whining softly, nuzzling her side. Keagan ran to her and dropped to his knees, pulling her into his arms. "It's over," she whispered. "I think it's finally over." In the days that followed, they burned what remained of the frame and buried the bones deep in the woods beyond their property, as Jared instructed. The house grew quiet again. No knocks, no shadows, but they never rebuilt the guest bedroom. And the closet stayed sealed, not from fear, but respect. Some doors are meant to stay buried.